All right, let's set the scene here. Imagine you'd finally gotten a fresh start. After years of tension, of feeling like you're not being heard, you get the official approval to move to a new agency, IFRC. This was supposed to be the answer, you know? It felt like this huge step forward, the moment things were finally going to change for the better.
Partnership, respect, flexibility. I mean, these weren't just some words on a website. This was the promise of a whole new chapter. All of IFRC's language was about support and collaboration. It really seemed like, at last, here was an agency that was actually ready to listen and work with you.
And that, right there, is the central question of this whole situation. What happens when that hopeful language you see in a contract slams into the day-to-day reality of a working relationship? That gap can be huge. So let's really explore what went down. So the move to IFRC gets the green light from CLBC, which is the provincial governing body. Now, for the caregiver, Victor, this was way more than just paperwork. This was a move toward a partnership that he was banking on being built on real, genuine support and fairness. You know, that initial feeling was just pure relief. Total optimism. The IFRC contract seemed more balanced, their tone felt welcoming. Every single sign was pointing to a relationship that would be built on the kind of mutual respect that had been missing for so long. Okay, but let's get into it. Because that optimism, it didn't last. Almost right away, that hope started to fade, and this growing sense of unease took its place. A series of small but really consistent problems started popping up.
And look, it wasn't one big, catastrophic mistake. That's the key here. It was a pattern, a slow drip, a late reply on something urgent one week, a task getting pushed back onto the caregiver the next. Each one of these things seems pretty minor on its own, but when you put them all together, they created this steady pileup of small failures. The explanations from IFRC always sounded reasonable enough, right? Oh, the program is new, or we're a small agency, we're still building our processes. But in practice, what these excuses really did was quietly shift responsibility. Bit by bit, real work was being moved from the agency right onto the caregiver's plate, without anyone formally acknowledging it. This whole pattern of shifting work, it pointed to a much deeper, more structural problem in the system. And it all became crystal clear when you looked at one specific thing, the day program, which is also called community inclusion. And this right here, this was the central paradox. Victor, the caregiver, had absolutely zero formal authority over this program. He didn't manage it, he didn't hire for it, he wasn't paid for it. But when that program failed, when plans fell through or staff made a mistake, who had to deal with the fallout? He did. He was the one left managing the client's stress, 24/7. All of the responsibility, with literally none of the control. So things were already tense, but the issues were no longer just about administrative hiccups or these weird system flaws. Things escalated into a direct conflict, a fight over authority and trust. And it all came to a head because of one key financial event. The real turning point came when Victor found out that IFRC had withheld money that was supposed to be paid to him. And this wasn't just a delay in payment, it was a deduction. The agency just took it without his consent. So where did that money go? Well, it turns out the agency used those funds to forcibly register Victor with WorkSafeBC. That's a provincial agency for workplace safety. And registration isn't free, you have to pay premiums. IFRC just decided to pay them, using Victor's money. And let's be super clear on this. At that time, mandatory WorkSafeBC registration was not a standard across-the-board CLBC policy for all home-sharing providers. This was a decision made solely by IFRC, and they did it without agreement by taking money that had already been approved for payment to him. So Victor tried to resolve this directly with IFRC. He got absolutely nowhere. So he had no choice but to escalate things, filing a formal complaint with the higher authority, CLBC. And after they investigated, CLBC sided with him and ordered IFRC to give the money back. And they did return it. But by that point, it wasn't even about the money anymore. The incident just completely shattered the foundation of trust. I mean, how could you possibly rely on an agency that thinks it has the authority to take your money without your permission for something that isn't even a universal policy? So, out of this whole period of growing alarm, the entire conflict really started to boil down to two specific recurring issues. These weren't just little details anymore. They became the absolute core of the disagreement. First, there was the whole WorkSafeBC thing.
What did this mandatory registration really mean for someone who's an independent contractor? And maybe more importantly, who even has the authority to force it on you and decide how it gets paid for?
And the second major issue was that deep structural flaw with the day program. That paradox we talked about, being held completely responsible for the outcome of something you have absolutely no authority over.
So the big question is, why? How did everything boil down to these two specific things? Well, they basically became the battlegrounds for fairness, for boundaries, and for authority. And if you want to understand what happened next, you absolutely have to understand these two issues inside and out.
And that is exactly what we are going to do. In our next explainer, we are going to take a deep dive into the nuts and bolts of both WorkSafeBC and the day program. We're going to unpack why they became such major points of conflict and what it all means. We'll see you then.